I am grateful to be here. It's really great. I'll wait and see. You're good? Truly, it's great to be, this is how I should phrase it, great to be out of Sacramento and in a room full of people that are normal. So thank you. What a joy. We live in Rancho Cucamonga, and it took us 5 hours. It said on MapQuest 4 hours and 49 minutes, and it took us 5 hours and 3 minutes. And the drive was nice until we got a little bit smoky, but it's just great to be up here. And I either have shorts and t-shirts or suits, so I don't have too many things in between. My wife thought I overdressed, but I hope that's okay. So thank you guys again for having me here. And for the good work that you guys are doing to try to save our country. I used to be in real estate. We had a real estate company and a lending company. And so that's what I did most of my adult life. But I always wanted to run, so I was involved with church activities as well as political activities down in Southern California. And one of the things is my wife and I both felt wouldn't be a wise thing to be 350 miles away from home trying to raise kids. You know what I mean? It's hard to Skype them and that sort of thing, you know what I mean? And so when the youngest one left for college, that's when I got the green light from Joni, and I ran, and unexpectedly I actually won, you know? Running 7 candidates, so it split the vote up, and it was a pretty nice thing to be able to do that. And one of the reasons I ran, because you had asked me tonight, you know, what's my goal? You know, I really didn't tell you what my main goal was. Years ago, you know, I had been reading the scriptures trying to figure out what's my purpose in life? Why am I here, you know? And in Proverbs it says, a father leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So I thought, I'm going to leave them each $10 and I'm done, right? But you know, as I got a little bit more, became somewhat more mature, I realized that goes beyond just money, but we got to save our country, ladies and gentlemen. And so, not that there's any guarantee in that, as you know, but we work to do what we can, right? And so, and I had always been doing those things, but when it came time to run, I ran and I won. But there's a couple of things I want you to know. Growing up, there's 2 things you shouldn't talk about. Do you remember those 2 things we were told? Religion and politics, right? But here's what history has proven. The only 2 ways men oppress other men and either send them into 1,000 years of bondage or set them free are through those 2 institutions of religion and politics. So at the end of the day, you know, they're so closely intertwined because, you know, the 10 Commandments are religious, but they're also voted into laws, right? Thou shalt not murder. And so really, I think those are perhaps the 2 most important things to talk about life, because they control our lives, as history has proven. And so, again, the number one question that I have been asked the last couple of years, because some people have been depressed, is there hope for California? And I have to say, I've always thought there was hope, but I've had my doubts, you know, until the last 2 years. And tonight, I'll share a little bit later why I believe I have some empirical data and 3 or 4, I have a number of things, but I'm only going to share 3 or 4 what I believe to be key leading indicators, sort of things that I've learned from history. I think about Churchill and some of the things he said when they thought Great Britain was done, and we're nowhere near the depths of despair that they were in. And so I'll go into that a little bit later, but here's what I want you to know. You can't leave California for a couple of reasons. Number one, California has 40 million people. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. And you've heard this saying, haven't you? As California goes, so goes the nation. So if you think you're going to leave it, it's going to catch up to you in Arizona, Utah, or Texas, because we send our best. We send our technology from the Silicon Valley. We send our prosperity, and we send our smut that comes out of Hollywood across this land and across whatever. And so it's a state that I believe, if you're here and if you do believe in purpose and a higher power, my wife and I have committed to draw the line in the sand, plant the flag, and do what we can to save our state, because it will follow us elsewhere. As they said, Colorado used to be a red state, and a lot of the growth that they've had has been from Californians. Now it's a purple state. And I talked to somebody yesterday, and who lives in Arizona, and they're concerned about too many Californians moving to Arizona. So again, as California goes, so goes the nation. There's a lot at stake here, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why I believe we're in the right place at the time, even though it doesn't always feel like that. But I kind of want to give you a little sense. I wasn't involved with politics before I got into politics. I mean, I wasn't elected to the city council or dog catcher or anything like that. I ran because I didn't think I would be very good at local politics. I like sort of things on the economy and on social issues, and so those sort of drove me. So I ran, and when I first got elected, I want you to know it was pretty neat at nighttime to see that big Capitol dome lit up, right? And not only that, but I could drive in underneath the dome parking lot. I don't know why, I thought that was exciting. Then my first night I came back and I had a key card. It was about 9:30 at night, and I'd been at a dinner, and I zipped that thing and I had access to the Capitol. And you know, I felt pretty good about myself for the first 3 weeks. Then when you get to know some of the people up there, you start to change. So C.S. Lewis, any C.S. Lewis fans in here? So C.S. Lewis wrote a book, The Screwtape Letters, if you remember about it. And it's a fictional account about the elder demon speaking to his nephew, Wormwood. And so, again, it's a fictional tale. But C.S. Lewis wrote sort of what his motivation for that was, because the goal of Screwtape is to destroy people's souls as well as nations. And so when I read this, what C.S. Lewis wrote, I said, this really feels much how I feel when I go to Sacramento. So I just want to try to have you get into my shoes. Now, I don't feel this way about everybody up there, but when I walk through those halls, I mean, the big dome is beautiful. You've got those floors. They're always, every night, they're shining them. They just gleam. And, you know, it's a nice place to walk. But don't let the glitter and the glints, glamour and glam or whatever, fool you, because here's some of the things that I see go on, and I hope you can sort of experience with me what I see. C.S. Lewis says this: I live in the managerial age, in a world of administration. The greatest evil is not done in those sordid dens of crime that Dickens loved to paint. It is not even done in those concentration or labor camps. In those we see its final results. But it is conceived and ordered, moved, seconded, carried, and minuted in clean, carpeted, warm, and well-lighted offices by quiet men with white collars and smooth-shaven cheeks who do not need to raise their voice. Hence, naturally enough, my symbol for hell is something like that of the bureaucracy of a police state. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Sacramento, what I've learned, is a very dangerous place, what goes on behind some of those committee doors. And things are moved, seconded, and carried. And it's kind of amazing to me how many people I meet and I explain to them some of the bad laws, and they have no idea that these things are going on. And here's what's bad about that. Remember, America is the first nation in history to have freedom. There was no such thing. We call them rights, natural rights, okay? There's only a few of them that God gives. And they're written down in the Declaration of Independence. And because of that document, here's what happened. We're the first nation to have freedom of speech. We're the first nation to be governed by consent. The Declaration of Independence declares, in the second paragraph, to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's a phenomenal phrase. It means no longer are we going to have to bow a knee to a king, but now we have the ability to choose our own leaders, ladies and gentlemen. But the thing is, remember in the Constitution it says, we the people? That's just not a trite phrase. That's a phrase that they really meant. It was meant to be a citizen government. And the thing that our founders warned is when we back away from politics and we don't get involved, we let bureaucrats run it. And as C.S. Lewis says in the Screwtape Letters, that's what happens. And that's what happens to us today, because so many people that I meet have no idea that these bad things or these bad laws are being passed. And as I speak, and I've been fortunate to go all over the state, people I believe are waking up to these things. And so it's pretty tough. But for me, I have my friends across the aisle. They call themselves progressives. Have you ever heard that term, progressive? Let me explain what that means. It means the expansion of the bureaucratic state. In other words, more government, right? Did you know history? We've got about 5,500 years of recorded history that has proven that as government expands, liberty contracts, and freedom and prosperity soon cease to exist. That was what the whole American founding was about. That's why our United States Constitution limits government's power to 18, either 17 or 18 enumerated powers. Half of those is for national defense, and the other half is for the country, the government to provide infrastructure so our commerce can flow really easy, right? Other than that, so many of those hundreds and maybe even thousands of laws that we have and government agencies would not be in the Constitution because it was to be limited. But it was the people's duty, the consent of the governed, to watch over there. And today I have, you have people, they say, hey, we should have term limits. Some of you may believe that. Part-time legislatures, half-time, full-time, no-time legislatures. Here's what, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't matter, because as long as we keep electing people that don't follow the Constitution, if you put them in a part-time legislature, they can do just as much damage in a full-time. What we have to do to win this, because in fact, we do have term limits every 2 years in Congress, every 2 years in the state assembly, every 4 years in the state Senate, but we have to upgrade those leaders we send to represent us. It's the people's responsibility according to the principles of the American founding. And so we get the government we keep asking for. And I know you guys up here tend to be much more conservative than the city folks, but we've got to influence them. And I'll share with you a little bit later some of the things that I've been working on that's actually having an impact. And I hopefully you like that. But anyway, again, this expansion of the bureaucratic state, I just want you to know, they call themselves progressive, because doesn't that sound like a great word? You progress in science and technology, but you don't want to progress with bigger government. And so one day, if you raise your microphone and you speak on the floor, you might have your opponents across the aisle, 3 or 4 microphones go up, and then they trash what you say. But I took a chance. I put my microphone up and I said, you guys, you call yourselves progressives, but that's just the kind words for socialists. And I expected a volley of microphones went up. Not one microphone went up. So about 2 weeks later, I said the same thing again, nothing. So they've admitted, I think, I'm not sure, but I think Senator De Leon has admitted he's a socialist, which, the next step to that, of course, is despotism and despotism through force, right? And then it gets worse from there. And so that's why many of my associates up in Sacramento, ladies and gentlemen, by researching things they say, groups they belong to in college, many of them have endorsed the political ideologies of Marx and Lenin over those of Lincoln and Washington. But it's up to us, the people, the consent of the governed, to take back our state. And again, that's why things like this are very important. And again, I want to thank you guys for taking time to be involved, and we got to pass that down to the next generation. Wouldn't you agree with that? Okay. So anyway, but it is time. They've had 40 years of one-party rule, so it's time to tally the score. And I'm just going to, a lot of the things you've already mentioned here. The SB1, highest taxes, right? State, income tax, everything else. That's one reason people's leaving. The thing that's interesting to me is CEO Magazine every year for 12 years sends out to different CEOs across the country. And for 12 years in a row, 500 CEOs took their survey and said, the number one place out of all the 50 states they'd like to live is California. But do you know where the worst place is for them to do business? California. They're the worst. And so we've got a lot of jobs leaving. It hasn't caught up to our economy yet, but it will if we don't stop it. And one reason is high taxes, but another one is the regulatory state. They handcuff business, and it makes it tough for people to prosper. And the thing that I'm concerned about, when you read the demographics of people leaving, it's highly educated young professionals between the ages of 25 and 39 years old. We don't want our kids leaving. We want them staying here. So we've got to reduce that regulatory state. I want to talk about education too, because some people have comments about Common Core, and you may know this, but so they have Common Core because it's a nationalized thing, right? And I'm very concerned about that. and I'll explain why. The founders said the further government moves away from the people, the less efficient and effective it becomes. Wouldn't you agree? And so what you have is you only have a handful of people in a bureaucratic state that are dictating to those 100 million kids, students, K through 12. And so the reason we need Common Core is because our test scores keep getting worse. At one time, America was #1 in the world in education. Today, depending on the report, we're somewhere between 17th and 19th. California, if you remember, in the 50s and 60s was #1 in America. Today, we're, depending on what report you read, 44th to 46th, and I hear in math and science we're 47th, okay? But they say we needed Common Core because their test scores are going down. So we had 8 years of Common Core, and things aren't doing very good. But before we had 8 years of Common Core under President Obama, we had 8 years of No Child Left Behind under Republican George Bush. Do you guys remember that? And the results were a lot of our students got left behind, okay? But do you know what we had before No Child Left Behind? Under Clinton, Goals 2000, which they never met their goals. And then before that, you had 4 years of George Bush #1, and I actually read through what he wanted to accomplish. He wanted to be known as the education president, right? And I believe he was sincere, and I believe if he would have accomplished 1/4 of his goals, education would improve. The problem is he doesn't realize it's got to be at the local level. He tried doing it from Washington, D.C. with a small handful of bureaucrats, and of course he probably didn't understand some of those principles of the American founding, at least in that area. And then before that, you had Reagan, which I'm going to skip over because I believe what he believed. And then you had Jimmy Carter, who took away local control at its highest, started the Department of Education, and took local control and condensed it 3,000 miles away in Washington, D.C. Almost 40 years of empirical data, and our test scores keep declining. But do you know what we had before they took our education away and put it in D.C.? We had local control. A few years before that, do you know what we had? California, when we had local control, California was #1 in education in the United States, and the United States was #1. Because the point is why local control, the citizens of those cities and communities, the parents, the teachers, those students who sit right underneath their nose day after day, the founding principles believe they were just as capable of understanding what to teach those kids in their classroom than some bureaucrat 3,000 miles away. Do you understand why government needs to be limited? So again, when you look at the empirical data, when it was local control, California was #1 and America was #1 throughout the world. We should go back to those things because again, the parents in Oakhurst and the teachers in Oakhurst, I don't know them, but I'll put them against those small group of bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. any day. Another thing too, not to be proud of, I think working is good for the soul. As people of faith, we want to help the poor, right? But one thing Scripture says is we're commanded to help the poor, but never government. It's only God's people. And so government eats up and they consume too much of our money. And today, sadly, 34% of the nation's welfare, 50 states, the nation's welfare is right here in California. It's become a welfare state. We want it's good for the soul to work, ladies and gentlemen, unless if somebody's disabled. And it's just wrong, but I think my friends keep across the aisle do that so they have a voting block. A couple other things that has been very concerning to me is they've released tens of thousands of prisoners into the streets through AB 109 and Prop 47. And a lot of those crimes aren't being reported because if you go into a store, Nordstrom's, and if you steal clothes, as long as you keep it under $950, you don't get arrested. And so those things don't get reported. And so, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see crime. I've been talking to almost every police chief in my district, and they're seeing really, some really serious stuff starting to happen, and it's going to get even worse. So, need to consider that and fight harder because their goal is to release prisoners into the street. Any sane thinking person believes its government's job is to protect victims and law-abiding citizens. Would you not agree to something that simple? So we all have a lot of work to do. And I'm not going to go on to too many things, but again, I do think, ladies and gentlemen, we should be concerned over these things, because California has slipped into a very socialistic, embracing those ideologies of Marx more than Lincoln and George Washington. So earlier, I said in the beginning of the speech, is there hope for California? And some of you may have thought I was going to try to trick you and BS you, but I'm not. Let me share with you. 47 million people in Great Britain during World War II, 40 million in California. They were under siege. London was, the skies of London were lit up for 57 consecutive nights in a row. Can you imagine being bombed? They were pretty sure their country was doomed. Churchill requested to buy destroyers from FDR, and FDR didn't want to sell them to him. He finally did. He sort of lent them to him, but said we may have to take them back, because we were unsure as Americans whether Britain was going to win. I'll go over that with you guys in a minute. It was passed out a little early, but we'll go over it with that in a minute. And so anyway, they were in a pretty dark spot, but I want to read you why I appreciate Winston Churchill, what he said during those times, as you consider being in his shoes, what he faced. Churchill says this: when great causes are on the move in the world, stirring all men's souls, drawing them from their firesides, casting aside comfort, wealth, the pursuit of happiness in response to impulses at once awe-striking and irresistible, we learn that we are spirits, not animals, and that something is going on in space and time and beyond space and time, which spells duty. What he believed is you never know what the Almighty's doing, I guess, up in space, right? Could be getting ready to turn bad for America, or it could be, but we, no matter win, lose, or draw, we citizens who love our country, we have a duty to always fight. That's what Churchill believed. And that's why they ended up winning the war. And so, ladies and gentlemen, things are on the move. So I want to give you 4 what I believe are key leading indicators why there is hope for California. First of all, with all these bad bills that are coming along, polling has suggested that my friends across the aisle, even their people in their party, are losing confidence in them. This is good for us. But the thing is that there's a void there right now. But that void has to be filled. And it can only be filled if we speak out. We cannot be silent. And I'm talking about everyone here, but I'm talking about my friends in the Republican Party. Sometimes we get too busy up in Sacramento and we forget that the fight is to win the hearts and minds of the people by clearly communicating what we believe. You know, I'm always interested in Bernie Sanders because, you know, he's an old white guy who had a lot of the millennials wanted to vote for him. Do you guys remember that? Think about what he said. He said, hey, you young millennials, you've been screwed over by this previous generation, and you're not going to have economic opportunities available to you. Does he not say that? But his way of solving it is through more government. Ladies and gentlemen, the way Tea Party, constitutionalists, and Republicans believe, we believe almost the same thing, that we want something for that generation. We think it's solved by not with more government, but by less government. That means they're there for our taking if we clearly communicate those political principles of limiting government's power and showing how it can lead to prosperity, ladies and gentlemen. We have to fill that void, and that can be done. So that's one indicator based on polling. Second one, and again, Churchill sort of talked about this. You know, this politically correct talk, it's been around. There's nothing new under the sun, correct? And this talk's been around through the millennials, right? Through thousands of years. They've just called it different things, but they had it in Churchill's day. And Churchill talked about the socialists. He told them, he said, here's why we can beat them. Because they've ran out of arguments. And whenever they run out of arguments, do you know what they do? They blame and accuse, and they accuse and blame. Ladies and gentlemen, when we look at the press today and we look on national TV, are they coming up with arguments, or are they just accusing, and blaming? Character assassination. Churchill says that means they're weak. We can take them, but it has to be us who fills that void. That's my second one. And that's according to Churchill, by the way. But we can't be silent to win. The third one, and this is the one Joni, my wife, perhaps thinks is maybe the most important that I do. You know, as a senator, the average senator hires 3 to 5 interns per year. When I got into the Senate, there wasn't any book that said that. All I knew was my Democrat in the office to the right of me and one to the left of me had 3 times the staff as I did, because he who has the gold makes the rules, so they have charge of the coin purse on who gets what money. So I was short quite a bit of people. So I started hiring interns, and between my Sacramento office and my office down in Southern California, I think I hired 47 my first year that came in. Yeah, I didn't know they did 3 to 5. So the thing is, we worked them really hard, teaching them how to answer the phone, take a proper message to things that on policy and Senate. But another thing I wanted to really get back to them is we started training them in the Constitution 101 through Hillsdale College. We gave them we did a syllabus, selective writings of the Federalist Papers, and I think you guys are going to love this. And the third thing is we introduced them to a half-hour tape on Plutarch and another half-hour tape on Aristotle's Ethics, and hoping, you know, they would continue on. And so a few things I'd like to share with you, which I'm really pleased what's happened. Most of these young college students are political science majors, and a number of them have come to us when they're done, keeping in mind they're political science majors, and they said, I've never heard any of these things in college. Political science majors, they've never heard any of these things. And so anyway, to make a long story short, we've gotten a reputation, and thank God in most cases it's a good one, right? And so we're having senators hire our people who are interns. We've got them in Congress. We've got them up at the finance department. We've got them in the assembly. And I even had one young man, his name's Elliot. He started with me as an intern, and he called me. He made it to the communications department at the White House. And he said, I just want to thank you, Senator Morrell, for giving me my start. And I said, Elliot, here's how it works. If you turn out to be successful, I'm going to take credit for it. But if you blow it, I'm going to deny that I ever knew you. But anyway, my point being is, you know, they talk about these millennials, right? You've heard some negative things about them. The ones that I meet, I got to tell you, we don't say you got to be conservative or whatever. We take any shape, size, or colors in any party, and we're just going to train them in the truth, right? And it's pretty interesting. The thing that their generation is different from my generation, those young people may not have all the answers like we thought we had, but they're truth seekers, ladies and gentlemen. If you make the case to them in a compelling case and you spend time with them, I'm always amazed, because they are looking for the right answers and they're not finding them. And so that has just been a breath of fresh air for me, because we've had them come back. Remember, they work for free. We've had some come back and work for us again, and then we have speaker series, and they'll come back to us. And the speaker series we do, I invite these speakers who teach the Constitution, who I know, and I tell these young students, hey, give this guy a hard time, ask hard questions. And of course, you know, the speaker knows what he's talking about. I got to tell you, the last 2 that we had, we were asked, we can have the building from 6:30 to 9:30 p.m., but at 9:30 we have to leave because the custodian needs to get in. The last 2 of those speaker series we had, those students stayed till 9:30 and followed the professor out to the parking lot. One time they stayed till 11:30, the next time they stayed till 12:30 a.m. wanting to hear more. You tell me there's not something good going in that generation, ladies and gentlemen. I think there is. We don't want to sell those guys short. And then sort of my last, what I believe is a key indicator, Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, that 700-page book, he goes all over what was America at the time, trying to find the secret of our success. And he notices, you know, we've got the St. Lawrence Seaway goes halfway up the Midwest. We've got great natural resources, agriculture, but he said, I finally understand what made this country as prosperous and powerful it is. He said, I walked into the churches and saw that the flames, that the pulpits were aflame with righteousness. And then what he did is he made this famous statement we probably all heard. De Tocqueville says, America's great because America's good. And when America ceases to be good, will cease to be great. And what he meant is what keeps the politicians in check was those people in the pews, you see? And then what happens, that goes into popular culture and then eventually makes its way to the politics. That's why many theologians, some of the greatest theologians in history, says politics is theology applied. Meaning if you want to take a temperature of the strength of the pulpit, you look at the end result, which is politics. And today that's a little bit weak because some pulpits have become, as I would say, user-friendly, seeker-sensitive. But here's the good news with that, which I'm amazed. My first 5 years, nothing happened. But over the last 2 years, I had a pastor come in and ask me, hey, can I come in here and encourage you guys and pray with you? And I go, that'd be fine, but I'd like something more. And he said, what would you like? I said, I'd like men, strong men, to come in here and hold us all accountable for these bad votes. So he came back a week later and said, do you want to speak to 50 Baptist pastors? And I said, sure. And he says, tell them exactly what you told me. Well, here's what I'd like to share with you, because I don't believe in coincidences. But over the last 2 years now, I've had a chance to speak at conferences in Pomona, San Bernardino, Long Beach, Woodland, Visalia, Washington, D.C. to California. I've probably spoken to maybe over 600 pastors. Some of them have radio programs, some of them have big mega churches, some of them have small churches. But as near as I can tell, they have the ability to influence about 4 million people. And out of those 600 pastors that I've spoken to, this year alone, 300 of them have come up to the Capitol for training. They want to know how to take back the state, ladies and gentlemen. And just oh yeah. And just a few weeks ago, the Gallup poll says, if you get these evangelicals involved voting in California, they'll win. But again, so we'll see what these pastors do. Yeah, we'll see what their pastors do, because it's good to have good people voting. Because again, the first thing I said tonight was politics and religion matters. If Washington, our president, was asked, what's the secret of America, what made us so great overnight? And Washington says it's the first time in human history where the best of Jerusalem intersected Athens. What he means by that is faith and reason. First time in history. And so when you look at that, I love, Lincoln reminds us in a day of prayer, he said, have we vainly imagined, the words he used were so beautiful, have we vainly imagined into the deceitfulness of our own hearts that this prosperity is somehow some superior wisdom of ourselves? He says, no, it's not. It's come from the Almighty. And then Washington, in his farewell address, the centerpiece of that speech, as he's leaving office for good after fighting in the war and president 2 terms, he wanted to make sure and hit home that the Americans knew that of all the habits and dispositions which lead to political prosperity, morality and religion are indispensable supports. And so you can go back to John Locke, Samuel Rutherford, or Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, Cicero, Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates. It's about morality and religion. They're all intertwined with politics, ladies and gentlemen. Even if you go back and you read about the great deliverer who took his people out of Egypt after 400 years, he reminds them over 14 times that you're going to be given prosperity and the peace and safety to enjoy it. But it's all predicated that you're careful to be a people who are moral. And so all of history, and the reason I mention this is because I certainly don't have all the answers to life's questions, but I certainly try to stand on those shoulders of people who possess a superior wisdom than mine, a superior wisdom politically, theologically, and philosophically. And so that's sort of why I believe this is the path we have to take, because those who went before us, who made it happen, said this is the way it needs to be done. And those are things that I see happening. And insofar as we do have to get back and relearn the Constitution, because again, it limits government's power, it ranks the citizen above the state. We should never be afraid of our government. I had people from San Bernardino County who work for the county government. They're afraid. They're doing a lake project, and government's beating up builders, are getting beat up by government. Who wants to go in the DMV, at least in Southern California, and sit there all day, right? And so government is supposed to work for us, ladies and gentlemen, not against it. And remember, it was meant to be our servant, not our master. And we, the people, have to remind those government officials of that they work for us, we pay their salaries. We got to get a little bit tougher with those guys, right? And so anyway, those are some of the things we have to do. And we have to share those things, these self-evident truths, with our friends. And one of the things I'd like to share, this will probably be another empirical data. I handed you guys this, and what it is, it's a pretty neat thing. In the last 4 years, my side of the aisle, the Republicans, haven't stopped any really bad bills, right? It's been tough, but sometimes I know churches put up on the board, call your legislator and stop this bill, and they usually do it when it's going to the floor. So there's 40 senators. That means we have to stop 21 votes. And in the assembly, there's 80 assembly people, so you have to stop 41 votes. So that's 62. So they wait till it gets to the floor. That's why we lose. So we got to stop them when we're in committee. You see? And so what we do is, there's actually 2 Republicans on this, but my guy forgot to list them because they voted on our side for this. But 2 plus 5 here, 7. That means we already had 2 votes. We only have to find 2 out of these 5 people. We have to stop them or get them to vote no on some of these bad bills. And then it doesn't. So my point is it easier to stop 2 bills or 62 bills? Right now we're doing it backwards. We call it the last minute. So what I'm trying to do is, if you look at the first one, Hannah Beth Jackson, the cities she represents, Santa Barbara, Buellton, Solvang, Goleta. Do you see those there, guys? Okay, if you call her office and you're not living there, they don't care. So don't call our office. But what you need to do, there's going to be times you're going to get these alerts. And why don't you pass out? If you want these alerts, write your email very clearly for me, and I'll make sure you get these alerts. But write it clearly. And so what happens is, you may not have any of these legislators in your district, but you know people who do. I mean, look at all those cities here. I know you know people and pastors in those areas. So what I've been trying to do in the state is, I'm trying to get like an email tree going, or what did you call your group? I like yours better. At dinner table, you said about SWAT, like a SWAT team or a Navy SEAL team. And so in other words, I know if you look at every city on here, I know some of you people know people in that city who go to church, who's at a Tea Party, who's a Republican, and if you know pastors. And so do you understand what we're trying to do is, like we were talking over dinner, you've got friends in San Diego. You see somebody on here from San Diego, you call those people, like Garlow, right? You call him and say, hey, we need you and all your people to contact Senator so-and-so in Hannah Beth Jackson's office. Does that make sense to you guys? And so again, we want to develop this up and down the state. I've passed this out to hundreds of people, and I'm trying to get every club to have 2 people that take control of this. So when I send this out to you, you guys have 2 people in charge, and you go through there and you contact the people in your organization here, trying to see if they know some of these senators in these different cities. Because here's what Ronald Reagan said, ladies and gentlemen, why we can stop this. Ready? Ronald Reagan said, if we can't make the politicians see the light, we can certainly make them feel the heat. And one thing they don't like to do is get their office called and say, we don't want you to vote for this. That's how we win. I'm going to close this up here in about 2 minutes. But last 4 years, we've stopped 0 bills as Republicans on social issues. So with these pastors coming to town, last year at the end of the year, I said, what should our goal be for this next year? And they asked me, how many do you stop? I said, none. So they said, maybe we ought to start with 3 bills. I want you to know, for the first time now in 5 years, we stopped those 3 bills. We stopped 3 really bad bills by April, ladies and gentlemen, with a super minority. We are in the minority, and we were able to stop 3 bills. So this is starting to work, but we have to get more organized and get it efficient and effective, and we need your help to do that. So please do that. Let me close and give us an assignment on how we're to think about these things tonight. And then when I'm done, if I have time, I'd be happy to take some easy questions, okay? No hard questions. But again, you can tell I'm a little bit of a fan of Churchill. So let me close with a thought that he had, and hopefully we can leave here tonight with the same calling. Churchill says this: "Our future and that of many generations is at stake. We are sure that the character of human society will be shaped by the resolves we take and the deeds we do. We need not bewail the fact that we have been called upon to face such solemn responsibilities. We may be proud and even rejoice amidst our tribulations that we have been born at this cardinal time for so great an age and so splendid an opportunity of service here below." Thank you, guys.
I want to brag a bit about your pastor. And I don't know how long you were in that church. How long have you been with Pastor Gibbs? 10 years?
I like to think he's been with me, but...
Well, his pastor is very instrumental in the state. He's one of the Black Robe Regiment. That is a term you can ask about later. But he basically encourages his church to be involved every single week. My understanding is they have a table with the issue of petitions, and he encourages people to run for office in his church. They've taken over the school boards, they've taken over the area. They go all the way to Sacramento. I've met Gina Gleason, and your pastor actually spoke at our church 5 years ago for National Day of Prayer. And he literally talked to the congregation, said run for office, and what was the name? Fairbanks. Dennis Fairbanks ran because of him. And I'm so proud of him, and he's part of this movement of pastors that are going to Sacramento, going to Washington, D.C., and we are so excited and so honored that you are here. You are a senator and taking the time to come see us. And I just pray all of us are inspired. But if you do have a church and a pastor that you're working with, or know people that are, this has been very key for the state to get the pastors involved. And it's just been exciting.
Well, one thing, I was in sales. And first of all, I think Providence is doing something, not Mike Morrell. But one thing that I am using the gifts that he's given me, I've spoken to a number of these, what I call good guys, but user-friendly. They don't want to rock the boat, right? And right now is a good time to be telling them, nobody wants to be left outside the door. So when I start telling them, 600 and 300 to come up to, it's kind of interesting. It's sort of like, tell me more, tell me more. So you guys should use those lines because it's truthful and it's pretty cool. And so I think you're going to see more jump on board. Anyway, thank you for that plug and appreciate that. Any questions? Got to be easy.
Democracy in America is a tough read for me. I'm just kind of a simple guy.
Yeah.
But I love that quote. And I met a guy one time. I searched for the secret of America's greatness, and it wasn't until I ventured into the churches of America and heard her pulpits flame with righteousness that I discovered her secret that America is great. But we both said it simultaneously. And his name is Alan Reinach. He's in charge of religious liberties for the Seventh-day Adventist Church, attorney, and he's been on Fox a number of times as a contributor. But de Tocqueville is fabulous, and if you can get through Democracy in America, it's a tough read because it's written in that old style of 200 years ago or 150 years ago. But
one thing too, thank you for that. That's a good thing. And some of the books I read, I haven't read. I get them on tape. Screw Tape Letters is the best book on tape you can get because it speaks in kind of a demonic, yeah, you get what I'm saying. Hey, one other thing, too, that I forgot to say in my speech. Think about California's rich heritage. The Azusa Street revivals were here. You mentioned the Seventh-day Adventists is what made me think about it. Azusa Street revivals, because of that, in L.A., had 68, 69 million Pentecostals throughout the world. Now that was started here. The Church of Christ started here. The Calvary Chapel movements started here. Focus on the Family, World Vision. 21 missions, the only state with 21 missions. My daughter and I were up at Forest Home up near Big Bear Lake. It was a father-daughter retreat, and on the backside of the lake is this old wooden cross, and we wanted to go back there and look, and at the foot of that cross is a plaque dedicated to a man who was young who went there, and God had called him to preach the gospel throughout the world. And you know what name was written on that plaque in California? Billy Graham. You see? And then, and so, you know, you've had Sacramento means the city of sacraments, right? Holy communion, holy matrimony. They're hidden in the bushes, but there's a statue of 3 nuns in the bushes they tried to hide. And those are the Sisters of Mercy who donated that land on the Capitol to be the Capitol, right? That's our building, that's not theirs, right? It was dedicated to God. Santa Cruz means the cross. I mean, such a rich Christian heritage. And here's what I've come to believe, ladies and gentlemen. Many have forgotten our wonderful heritage we have, but God hasn't forgotten it, nor has he written California off.
That curriculum that you use with your interns,
Yeah.
is it available, and is it all written, or is some of it, like, you have people come in and present it, or is it just documents?
We have it written. We have it written down.
Okay, and how, if I wanted a copy of that, how would I get it?
Send $29.95 to. Now, what would you need it for?
Well, I'd like to, first of all, I'd like to go through it myself.
Yeah.
I'd like to have it available for people that I run into.
Give me your name, address, write it all down legibly, cell phone number in case if I lose it, and remind me to send you a copy of that, and I'd be happy to do that.
Is that list
You
going
were-
around? Wait, I want to ask. Is there a list going around?
A couple of lists going around.
Is there one at each table?
Any other questions? Because I should.
It'll come back. Somebody else has to come back.
One. Yes.
Have you heard of the book written by Dr. Henry Fellaini called God, Gold, in California?
Where does that guy live?
He's in Mariposa. He's out of
Yeah. Okay. Let me tell you, he turned my head. So this guy comes in, and he's kind of a cowboy, right? Big cowboy hat. And this is about 4 years ago he came in. He claims God's going to do all these things. And that's where I got, he has a whole list, 3 times as much as I do, about all the wonderful things California. Jedediah Smith, who came out here during a gold rush with a Bible and a shotgun to restore law and order. I mean, he spoke. So when I walked into this room, the young lady who was working for him hands me his book and said, God's going to have a revival. And I said, here in California, I said, young lady, God left here 20 years ago. But when I was done in that room, when he got done speaking, I went, oh, man, I might have to eat my words here, you know. So anyway, yeah, and I read that book, and it's a great book. I'd like to meet that man again and tell him my...
So you're saying the part of the strategy is to get ahead of the curve and find out when these bad bills are being drafted at what, would you say in committee? Is that what you said?
Well, after they're done in committee, but when they go to committee, in other words, here's what happens. A bill may have to go to 2 to 3 committees. So it goes to one committee, let's say there's 11 people in there, you need 6 votes to stop it, right? And then if it gets 7 votes for it, then it goes to another committee. Then after it goes to that committee, it goes to the floor, and you have to get 41 votes out of 80 votes. If it passes the floor, then it goes to the Senate, and usually there's 2 committees in the Senate. And remember, this is gaining steam. Then if it goes past those 2 committees, then it goes to the Senate floor where there's 40 votes, and you need 41. So each time it leaves a committee, it gains more and more support and strength.
So how do we, so we need a spy. We need a spy that when something bad gets kicked off at the very beginning,
That's what I'm here
that's
for.
where we need the SWAT teams. Then. So who's inside these committees
Me.
that can be a, but you're not aware of everything that's going on there, right?
No, we're not going to target every bill. What we're going to do is we're going to send you the worst of the worst until we get this thing going and organized, because we don't want to burn people out. People got to see we're getting victories, because one victory begets another. We got our 3 this year. We could end up getting 2 more. That would be huge. And so what happens, we want to stop it in the first committee. And so what I do, if you sign up on those action alerts, I send you what are the bad bills, and here's the first committee it's going to. If we stop it in first committee, we've stopped the bill. If it goes to the next committee, I'll keep bugging you even until it gets on the floor. But again, I got to tell you, is the camera off? They just let it die. They didn't want to do a yes vote or a no vote. But they panicked when you had 1,100 people walking through and they let you just say, hi, I'm Mike Morrell and I oppose this bill. That's all, you know, you had that going. I think that put the fear of God into people. So if you want us to go to Sacramento, that's even better. But this way, trying to get this phone tree going and have people here do that. That's going to be your most effective way, because those people you get live in those
So we
center.
can develop a whole strategy of network so that if we know
Yeah.
that this Democrat congressman or senator
Yeah,
is
yeah.
got a bad bill, that we need to know people in that district that can then.
Yeah, and I'm trying to wrap this up. Every place I speak, I'm trying to get 2 people in these groups to start networking with other people, you know, like with the Republican Women's Club up there, try to work with Pastor Jack down there, try to work with Garlo in San Diego. So we're trying to do this, but this is all new. But Lord willing, it's going to happen. One last question from you, young lady.
Now, I applaud you on your gill killing program. It's stellar. I've been wanting to see something like this for a long time. But I do have a concern about the whole religious group issue. And John and I know, I've been talking to them about this for years and years, that these religious groups and religious organizations are extremely powerful, extremely powerful. So if you can get their vote behind you, you have a lot of power. And there is a trend now I see where these religious organizations and churches are becoming more political. And but I have a concern, because what I saw happen in the primaries with one church, I guess you'd call it, which like kind of a conglomeration of churches, an individual influenced this one pastor who influenced all the other pastors. And I think it had an effect on one of the primaries. So that's my concern, is that you have this one person, maybe this pastor, who can influence this huge congregation, because let's face it, the congregation often goes with what the pastor advises and so on. So I don't know how to offset that, maybe with a committee that from the religious organization or church, and so the pastor doesn't have all the power and all the...
Yeah, well, you know, hopefully, I don't think that's a big problem, because I think for most people, you know, they're going to listen, but we still have our own mind, and I don't know what was the problem the pastor created.
It was the governor's race.
Governor race.
The governor's race was.
Pro-life drove the Christians to vote for John Cox. The other side was upset about that.
Yeah, I know. I know. I told Travis Allen early. Don't.
Well, the other side...
But anyway, here's the thing. Look at.
Travis Allen?
Listen.
John Cox supporters got attacked by Travis Allen.
Yeah.
And it caused them to vote for John Cox at the Republican convention, because Travis's volunteers were so aggressive and so attacking anyone that was voting for John Cox. It was nasty.
Well, here's the thing. Look at, to answer your question, a good question, let me just finish it off. There is no perfect system unless if you have perfect people. And so we just have to work those kinks out and everything. And I know Gina Gleason's trying to do that now, since it was kind of a big deal. So it is, you know, but here's what. I'd rather have us fighting than sitting on the bench. You don't score points sitting on the bench. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for allowing me to be here.